While U.S. President Donald Trump and German Chancellor Angela Merkel appear headed for a collision course on a number of issues, from climate change to trade, as they meet for the Group of 20 Summit of leading economies in Hamburg, Germany. But as VOA Europe correspondent Luis Ramirez reports, other economic and security issues could have the potential to bring everyone together.
President Trump says he has bold plans to slap tariffs or impose quotas on steel imports, the latest and perhaps most serious of threats to protect U.S. industry and part of his America First strategy, one that has G20 partners feeling nervous.
And what he's doing, he's throwing all kinds of cards up in the air, NAFTA, a critique of climate change, because he actually wants, I think, a bit of zero-based policy. I think at the end of the day, he probably, of course, wants free trade in the win-win sense. But what he's trying to expose is perhaps some of the hypocrisy of countries like China, who talk the talk of openness, but don't always deliver. So there's going to be a real clash of the titans at this summit.
Trump's shock talk has brought results. After threatening to not stand by NATO allies who do not pay their share of defense, came pledges by members to boost their contributions. He said he would rip up the North American Free Trade Agreement, and now he has a deal with Mexico on sugar exports. The U.S. leader's target now is China and its cheap steel exports that are blamed for killing jobs not only in the United States, but in Britain and other G20 states, including Germany. Climate is a big issue for some G20 leaders, but analysts say the threat of cheap Chinese steel imports could be a common cause and take precedence.
And joining us now for the latest from the G20 Summit in Hamburg, we welcome VOA Senior Correspondent Luis Ramirez on Skype from Hamburg, Germany. Hey, thanks for that report, Luis.
Good to be with you.
Before we get started on the various issues that were outlined in your report, Luis, I want to talk to you about what's been going on there in Hamburg. There's been a lot of clashes between police and protesters. What can you tell us about that?
Well, it's been a really violent 2 days, Mel. We've had, first of all, just before the summit started, massive protests. Thousands, up to 8,000 demonstrators, all leftists, all anti-G20, taking to the streets, trying to launch a march that they call Welcome to Hell. Police were able to disperse that using water cannon. That happened on Thursday, but on Friday morning, as the summit was getting underway, they decided to change their tactics a bit. Rather than try to all gather in one place as they had done before, they dispersed throughout Hamburg, trying to block access by delegations to the G20 venue. Caused a great deal of problems. Again, police turning up with water cannon, tear gas to break them up. And in some cases, they succeeded. Their aim is to disrupt the summit. They haven't been able to do that. They haven't been able to get near the venue. But as far as impeding delegations from getting to where they need to go, that certainly has happened.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to pay attention to what's going on outside of the G20 summit. But that summit, Luis, is Trump's second visit now to Europe. You covered that meeting in Brussels last May, when he told NATO allies to pay up or shut up. Are European leaders still upset about that?
Well, I'm more upset. I think they're nervous. And the one thing they have come to expect from Mr. Trump is surprises. He certainly surprised a number of people by one of the things he said in Brussels. Here, and especially in his earlier stop in Poland, made it clear that the United States stands behind its Article 5 commitments, that is, its obligations to defend any NATO ally against attacks from the outside. That was a very welcome statement for many European leaders who were nervous about that. Now they're hoping to see what he really means when he says he's putting America first and that he wants to return jobs to the U.S. The big, what's making people so nervous here is this appearance or this perception that the United States is becoming more isolationist and adopting more protectionist measures. Now, that said, none of the G20 members have adopted protectionist measures of their own in response to that perception. Which is a positive sign and one that can be interpreted as meaning that they are waiting to see just what he will say at this two-day summit.
For now, some reassurance there at least. But Luis, what do you think are the most contentious issues as this summit gets underway?
Well, number one, Mill, it is trade, most definitely. As I mentioned in my report, this matter of a glut of cheap Chinese steel exports that's really causing disruptions in economies from Germany to the United States. That is something that all sides have in common, something that the U.S. administration is very angry about and very determined to do something about. And so that is a very, very big issue here that could bring everyone together. Now, the things that are driving them apart very clearly also trade, because the U.S. is or at least has threatened very bold action on members of the EU, other G20 members, on the matter of steel exports, and also the issue of climate change. Some people here, Angela Merkel for sure, very upset about his decision to pull the U.S. out of the Paris Climate Accord.
So Luis, are you anticipating any kinds of resolutions or agreements on some of the issues that you just mentioned?
No agreements, really, but certainly a great deal of progress in terms of face time, in terms of establishing rapport that are so necessary, personal rapport that are so necessary between world leaders to be able to reach a consensus. Now, again, no one is ruling out any surprise from Donald Trump, and that could be in the form of concessions in regard to trade. It could be maybe not acting on these threats that he has made. That is the great hope that people are coming into the summit with. That said, you know, he has delivered on a number of other threats and certainly, stuck to his guns. And one example would be in his meeting today with the president of Mexico, Enrique Peña Nieto. That meeting was supposed to happen shortly after Trump's inauguration. It didn't, because they disagreed on the matter of the border wall that Mr. Trump wants Mexico to pay for. Well, going into that meeting, Mr. Trump dug in his heels. He said he continues to expect Mexico to pay for that border wall.
All of these very big issues, Luis, but likely I'm wondering whether or not the much anticipated Trump-Putin meeting is going to overshadow a lot of these issues. I understand there's already been a handshake between the two leaders.
Well, you're absolutely right that it's going to overshadow. It is the story of the day. These two leaders, so much said about them, between them, that all eyes are on that meeting. And the two men did run into each other at the start of lunch, gave each other a friendly handshake. Going into the meeting, Vladimir Putin was heard saying, "I am delighted to meet you," to Mr. Trump. So that seems to be getting off to a good start. We don't know exactly what they'll talk about, although we do have some good ideas of what they'll be discussing.
We expect we'll be hearing more from you on that issue. Thank you very much, Luis. It's time now for another break, but when we come back, Daniel Scherf and Peter Heinlein will join us on the set to talk exactly about that very much highly anticipated, high-stakes first meeting between Presidents Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. But first, a reminder, we want to hear from you. Share your thoughts, questions, and comments on our Facebook page. The address is VOA The Correspondents. We'll be right back.